Inside that small office, it was supposed to be a simple conversation, a routine warning, a firm lecture, nothing more. The officer had seen situations like this hundreds of times before. Nervous faces, quiet apologies, children who didn't fully understand the consequences of their actions. But this time, something felt different. The younger sister couldn't stop crying, not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears sliding down her face as she clung tightly to her older sister's arm. The officer's voice was firm, controlled, authoritative, the kind of tone meant to correct behavior, not invite discussion. He believed he was doing his job. Then the older girl lifted her chin. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply looked him straight in the eyes and answered. What she said changed the atmosphere in that room instantly. The officer wasn't prepared for it, and by the end of this conversation, neither will you be. Stay with me, because the real reason those girls walked into that office is not what you think. Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's get into the story. The air conditioner hummed in the corner of the small office. Officer Daniel Harper set the folder on the desk and opened it without hurry. He had done this hundreds of times. The chair across from him, the fluorescent light overhead, the faint smell of old coffee, all of it as familiar as his own reflection. He looked at what was inside the folder: 2 chocolate bars, 1 loaf of discounted bread, 1 small carton of milk. He had seen this kind of case more times than he could count. Kids testing limits, families not paying close enough attention, a firm conversation, a lesson learned. Everyone goes home. He already knew how this was going to go. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. Send them in, he said. The door opened. 2 girls walked in. The older one moved first. Steady, chin up, eyes forward. She was maybe 10 or 11, wearing a blue jacket that was just slightly too small for her, the sleeves stopping short of her wrists. She sat down in the chair across from Harper without being told and placed her hands flat on her knees. The younger one, 7 maybe, with dark eyes and a small braid coming loose on one side, came in behind her and immediately reached for her sister's arm. She wasn't crying out loud. She was doing something harder than that, trying with everything she had not to cry, her chin trembling with the effort. Harper gave them a moment to settle. Then he opened the folder, turned it slightly so they could see the contents list, and folded his hands on the desk the way he always did when he wanted to make sure a young person understood the seriousness of the situation. Do you know why you're here today? He asked. The older girl answered immediately. Yes, sir. Harper nodded. Good. They understood. This would be straightforward. Can you tell me in your own words why taking something from a store without paying for it is wrong? He expected the usual. Because it's stealing. Because it's against the rules. Because we shouldn't have done it. The older girl looked at him, not away, not down, directly at him, and with a steadiness that Harper had not expected and was not sure he had ever seen in someone her age. She said, we know it's wrong. We just didn't know what else to do. The hum of the air conditioner continued. The younger girl had stopped trying not to cry and was now very still, watching her sister the way you watch someone you trust completely to say the right thing. Harper didn't respond right away. He had been an officer for 19 years. He had heard excuses shaped as explanations and explanations shaped as excuses. He knew the difference between a child rehearsing something and a child telling the truth. This was the truth. He could hear it in the flatness of it. No drama, no bid for sympathy, just a statement of fact delivered by a girl who had clearly thought about it a great deal. We know it's wrong. We just didn't know what else to do. He looked down at the folder. 2 chocolate bars, a loaf of bread, a carton of milk. He picked up his pen. The form was right there. The standard report. The one he filled out automatically. The one that set everything else in motion. His pen hovered over the first line. Name of the minor. Date of incident. He didn't write anything. He set the pen down, and for the first time in a very long time, Officer Daniel Harper looked at 2 children sitting across from him, really looked at them, and understood that he did not yet know the first thing about why they were actually there. Harper leaned back in his chair. He didn't reach for the pen again. He didn't look at the folder. He just looked at the older girl, this child with her hands flat on her knees and her chin still up, and asked a question he didn't usually ask. Tell me what you mean, he said quietly. Take your time. The younger girl, she hadn't given her name yet, tightened her grip on her sister's arm. The older one didn't look at her, but her hand moved, just slightly, and covered her sister's without making a thing of it. A small gesture, automatic, the kind that comes from a long time of looking after someone. My name is Ava, the older girl said. She's Lily. Harper nodded. How old are you, Ava? 11. Lily's 7. He nodded again and waited. Ava looked at the folder on the desk for a moment, at the list of items, the dates, the official language that turned 2 chocolate bars and a loaf of bread into an incident report. Then she looked back at him. Our mom hasn't been feeling well, she said, for a while now. It's not something you can see. She's not sick the way you get a fever and then you get better. It's more like she gets very tired, and some days getting out of bed is really hard for her. Harper listened without moving. I've been making Lily's lunch before school, Ava continued, and breakfast. I know how to make a few things. A pause. But the refrigerator has been pretty empty for a couple of weeks. I was using what we had and trying to make it last. She said all of this the way someone reports the weather, clearly without decoration, as though the facts were simply the facts, and there was no use in arranging them differently. I waited until the store was almost closing, she said, so there wouldn't be many people there. Harper kept his voice level. Why did that matter? Ava glanced at Lily, then back at him. Because if Lily was seen, she said simply, I didn't want her to feel embarrassed. The office was very quiet. Harper thought about that for a moment. An 11-year-old girl standing in a nearly empty grocery store at closing time, thinking not about getting caught, but about protecting her 7-year-old sister from embarrassment. Where is your mom right now? He asked. Home, Ava said. She was resting when we left this morning. Does she know you're here? A small pause. The first one. No, Ava said. Harper nodded slowly. He looked at Lily, who had been watching him with those wide, careful eyes since she walked in. She had stopped trembling. She seemed to be doing what Ava did, reading him, deciding something. Are you hungry right now? Harper asked her directly. Lily looked at Ava. Ava gave the smallest nod. Lily looked back at Harper and said very quietly, a little bit. Harper stood up. He went to the small break room 2 doors down, opened the cabinet above the sink, and found what he was looking for. A box of crackers, a jar of peanut butter, 2 juice boxes that someone had left from a meeting earlier in the week. He brought them back to the office without announcement and set them on the desk between the folder and the edge of the table. Go ahead, he said. Lily looked at the crackers. Then she looked at Ava. Ava gave her the same small nod as before, and just like that, as if a switch had been flipped, Lily stopped being a frightened child in a police office and became a 7-year-old who was hungry and had just been given crackers. She reached for them. Ava waited until Lily had taken some before taking any herself. Harper watched that, the waiting, the order of it, and felt something shift in his chest, something old and quiet that he recognized but hadn't felt in a long time. He thought about his mother. She had raised 3 children by herself after their father died in a workplace accident when Harper was 9. She was a proud woman, deeply, quietly proud, the kind of proud that means you don't ask, you manage, you figure it out. He remembered the way she always served them first at the dinner table. He had never, as a child, thought to wonder whether there were nights she went without. He was wondering now. Ava ate a cracker and looked at him. Are you going to file the report? She asked. Harper looked at the form, at his pen, at the first blank line, name of the minor. I don't know yet, he said honestly. Ava nodded, not with relief, not with fear, just with the patience of someone who has learned to wait for the world to make up its mind. And Harper understood, sitting across from her in that small office with the folder still open between them, that whatever he decided next was going to matter in a way that most of his decisions never had. Harper drove to the address the next morning, not in a patrol car, in his own vehicle, a gray sedan with a cracked dashboard and a coffee thermos that had been rolling around the back seat since Tuesday. He wore plain clothes, no badge visible, no notepad in hand. He told himself he was just going to look. The neighborhood was the kind that had seen better decades without ever becoming truly difficult. Older houses on modest lots, some well-kept, some tired, all of them close enough together that neighbors could hear each other's screen doors in the summer. The kind of street where everyone knew everyone, or at least used to. He parked across the road and sat for a moment. The house was a pale yellow, or had been once. The paint had faded unevenly, lighter in the spots where the sun hit longest. The front porch had a rocking chair with a folded blanket over the arm. The small garden along the front walk had gone untended for a season, but wasn't gone entirely. A few stubborn plants still holding on at the edges. It was not a house that had given up. It was a house that was tired. He got out and crossed the street. He knocked twice, gently, waited, knocked once more. The door opened. The woman who answered was 38 years old, though in that moment she looked both younger and older than that simultaneously. Younger in her face, which still had something open and unguarded about it, and older in her eyes, which carried the particular weight of someone who had been managing something heavy for a long time. She was wearing a cardigan over her pajamas. Her hair was pulled back loosely. She looked at Harper the way people look at someone unexpected, not with alarm, just with the careful attention of someone deciding what this meant. Mrs. Hartley, Harper said, my name is Daniel Harper. I'm an officer with the Millbrook Police Department. I spoke with your daughters yesterday. Something moved through her expression. A flicker of worry, quickly steadied. Are they all right? She asked, immediately, before anything else. They're fine, he said. They're at school. I just wanted to come by and talk if that's okay. I'm not here officially. She considered him for a moment. Then she stepped back and held the door open. Inside, the house was what Harper had half expected and half hoped for, reasonably tidy, in the way that takes real effort when effort is hard to come by. A drawing of a house with a yellow sun was held to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a pineapple. On the kitchen table, written in the careful handwriting of a child older than her years, was a notepad page that said, Lily, school at 8:05, bus 14, lunch is in her bag. I checked. Ava's handwriting, Ava's instructions, left for a mother who who might not be up in time. Harper sat at the kitchen table when Melissa offered. She made tea without asking if he wanted any, just put the kettle on and got 2 mugs down from the cabinet, and he understood that this was how she had been raised, that you made tea when someone sat at your table, regardless of what else was happening. She sat across from him and wrapped both hands around her mug. She had the hands of someone who had worked physically for years, capable hands, slightly stiffened at the knuckles now, the joints swollen in the particular way of someone whose body had begun working against them. She had been a nursing assistant at a care facility for 11 years. She had spent those years lifting, steadying, comforting. She had taken care of people on their hardest days as naturally as breathing. "I know why you came," she said. She wasn't defensive, just clear. "Can you tell me how things have been?" Harper asked. She looked at her tea. "I was going to fix it," she said quietly. "I had a plan. I just needed a little more time." Harper didn't challenge that. He waited. After a moment, she continued, slowly, as if choosing each word carefully, as if she hadn't spoken this plainly to anyone in quite some time. She told him about the arthritis progressing faster than expected, about the shifts becoming difficult, then impossible, about leaving the job she had loved and was good at, about the medical appointments, the paperwork, the costs that didn't stop because the income had, about applying for assistance and being told there was a waiting list and that someone would follow up. No one had followed up. "I didn't want to ask anyone for help," she said. "I kept thinking, next week will be better. I'll figure something out." She paused. "I've always figured something out." Harper thought about his mother saying those exact words, not to him, to herself in the kitchen, when she thought the children were asleep. "I'll figure something out." "Ava has been very capable," Harper said carefully. Melissa looked up, and in her eyes he saw something that no protocol had ever prepared him for. Not guilt exactly, and not shame, but the specific grief of a mother who knows her child has been carrying something that should never have been hers to carry, and who loves that child so completely that the knowing of it is almost more than she can hold. "She's 11, Melissa said softly. "She's supposed to be worried about homework." The kettle had gone quiet. The tea was cooling. Harper sat with her in the silence of that kitchen and understood, with a certainty that settled into him slowly and without drama, that he was not going to walk out of this house and fill in that form the way he had filled in 1,000 others. He just didn't know yet what he was going to do instead. Harper sat in his car for a long time after leaving the house. He didn't start the engine. He just sat with his hands on the steering wheel and looked at the pale yellow house through the windshield, the faded paint, the stubborn garden, the rocking chair on the porch with the folded blanket still exactly where it had been. The street was quiet at this hour. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A neighbor's sprinkler ticked methodically through its rotation. Ordinary sounds, an ordinary street. He kept thinking about Melissa's hands wrapped around the mug, about the notepad on the kitchen table with Ava's careful handwriting, about the drawing on the refrigerator held up by the pineapple magnet, the yellow sun in the corner, the way children always draw the sun, as if it belongs in the picture as naturally as anything else. And then, without deciding to, he started remembering. He was 9 years old when his father died. A workplace accident, the kind that happens in an instant and takes everything with it. One day his father was there and then he wasn't, and the world simply continued moving at its regular speed, while their family stood very still in the middle of it. His mother had been 34 at the time, younger than Melissa was now. She had 3 children, a mortgage and a pride so deep and quiet that it operated almost like a physical force. It kept her upright, kept her forward-facing, kept her from asking for what she needed from people who might have given it willingly. Harper remembered the kitchen. He remembered the smell of it, whatever she was cooking, always something, even when there wasn't much to work with. He remembered how she served them first, always, without exception. His plate, his sister's plate, his brother's plate, full before she ever sat down. He had been a child. He had eaten his dinner and done his homework and gone to bed. He had never once in all those years thought to wonder whether there were nights she didn't eat. He was thinking about it now. 33 years later, sitting in a gray sedan outside a pale yellow house in Millbrook, he was thinking about it for what felt, with a particular and uncomfortable clarity, like the first time. Ava's voice came back to him. "We know it's wrong. We just didn't know what else to do." His mother would never have said those words. She would have found another way before she said those words. That was the nature of the pride he had grown up watching. It was protective and it was costly, sometimes at the same time. Melissa had the same pride. He had seen it in the set of her shoulders, in the way she said I was going to fix it, not as an excuse, but as a statement of genuine intent. She had believed it. She still believed it. But intent doesn't fill a refrigerator, and pride, Harper knew, could sometimes be the longest distance between a person and the help they needed. He thought about the form sitting in the folder back at the office, the standard report, the blank lines that led step by step to a process that was built to help but didn't always land that way, especially when the problem wasn't danger but exhaustion, not crisis but accumulation, not a family falling apart but a family holding together by means that were becoming too thin. He thought about what Okafor had said. Once you open that door, door. You don't control what comes through it. He thought about Lily reaching for the crackers and waiting for Ava's nod before taking any. He thought about his mother's kitchen. He started the car. He didn't drive back to the station. He drove to the school. He wasn't sure exactly what he was going to do when he got there. He didn't have a plan, not a complete one, but he knew that filling out the standard form and sending this case down the standard road was not the right move. Not yet, maybe not at all. What he needed first was to understand more, not as an officer building a file, as a person trying to see the full picture before deciding what it required. The school counselor's name was Ms. Tran. He had met her once briefly at a community meeting 2 years ago. She had seemed sharp and genuinely invested in the students she worked with, the kind of professional who stayed late not because it was required, but because she couldn't quite bring herself to leave when something felt unresolved. He hoped she was in. He parked in the visitor lot and sat for one more moment. He thought about his mother one last time, the way she looked in the mornings before anyone else was awake, standing at the kitchen counter with her coffee, just standing there in the quiet before the day began, before the children needed things, before she had to be strong again. He had walked in on her once. She had heard him and straightened immediately and smiled and asked if he wanted breakfast. He had said yes and sat down at the table, and she had made him eggs. He had never asked what she had been thinking about in that quiet moment before he walked in. He wished he had. Harper got out of the car, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the front entrance of the school. Whatever came next, he was not going to be the person who walked away without understanding. Ms. Tran's office was small and warm. There were plants on the windowsill, real ones, well kept, which told Harper something about the kind of person she was. A bookshelf along one wall held a mix of professional titles and children's picture books arranged without any particular system, as if both were equally important. A bowl of wrapped candies sat on the corner of her desk, the kind of detail that said, "This is a place where children are supposed to feel safe." She recognized him from the community meeting and shook his hand without surprise. "Officer Harper," she said. "Sit down. I was wondering if someone would come." That stopped him slightly. "You were expecting a visit?" "Not specifically," she said, "but I've been watching those two girls for a while now." She sat down across from him and folded her hands on the desk, the same way Ava had, Harper noticed, and wondered if Ava had learned it from adults she trusted, or if it was simply the posture of someone trying to appear more certain than they felt. "Ava is one of the most capable students I've worked with in 20 years. She's also one of the ones I worry about most." "Why?" Ms. Tran looked at him steadily. "Because children who are very capable very early are sometimes that way for reasons that have nothing to do with giftedness and everything to do with necessity." Harper nodded. She pulled a folder from her desk drawer, not a police folder, a school one, thin and carefully organized. She opened it and turned it toward him. The attendance records were perfect. Ava had not missed a single day. Neither had Lily. Every form returned signed, every permission slip on time, every absence request written in advance when there was a scheduled appointment, all in Ava's handwriting. Then Ms. Tran showed him the lunch records. Ava was registered for the school meal program. She appeared in the line every day. But the cafeteria's secondary log, kept by a staff member who had started noting patterns after becoming quietly concerned, showed that on at least 11 occasions over the past 2 months, Ava had reached the front of the line and then stepped aside, let the students behind her go, walked to her table without a tray. She always made sure Lily ate, Ms. Tran said. Every single day. The office was very quiet for a moment. Harper looked at the log. 11 days, 11 lunches. He thought about Ava sitting across from him, eating crackers in careful, measured bites, always after Lily had taken hers. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to be honest with me about how you see this situation." "Of course. If I file the standard report," Harper said, "what happens to this family?" Ms. Tran didn't answer immediately. She looked at the plant on the windowsill, the one closest to the glass, leaning slightly toward the light. "The system gets involved," she said carefully. "And the system, when it gets involved in situations like this one, doesn't always see what's actually there. It sees categories, checkboxes." She paused. "Poverty can look like a lot of things on a form that it doesn't look like in real life." Harper leaned forward slightly. "So, what do you think should happen?" "I think," Ms. Tran said slowly, "that this family needs support, not scrutiny. But I also think that getting them the right support without triggering the wrong kind of attention is a very narrow path." She met his eyes. "And I think you already knew that before you came here." He had, but hearing it said plainly made it heavier. He drove back to the station and went directly to Okafor's office. Detective Okafor was 53 years old, had been with the department for 26 years, and had the particular quality of someone who had seen enough of the world to be neither surprised by it nor resigned to it. She listened to Harper without interrupting. All of it, the visit to the house, the conversation with Ms. Tran, the lunch records, everything. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what protocol requires." "I know. And you know that once you open that door, you don't control what comes through it." "I know that too." Okafor looked at him, not unkindly. quickly. A report means documentation. Documentation means review. Review in a case involving a single parent with limited income and an ongoing medical situation means she stopped. You know what it means. He did. It meant that a family already stretched thin could find itself examined by a system that was trying to help but was also overburdened, underfunded, and moving too fast to always see the difference between a home that needed intervention and a home that needed a hand. He was walking back to his desk when a colleague stopped him in the corridor, a veteran officer named Briggs, who said it the way Briggs said most things, which was directly and without much softening. "You're still on that grocery thing?" Briggs said. "Harper, it's 2 candy bars. Bread and milk too," Harper said. Briggs shrugged. "Write it up and move on. You get too attached to these cases, you know that?" Harper didn't answer. He sat at his desk and looked at the open folder. The pen was right there. The form was right there. And somewhere across town, in a pale yellow house on a quiet street, a woman who had once spent her days caring for others was sitting at her kitchen table trying to figure out how to take care of her own children. He picked up the pen. He set it back down. And then he picked up his phone instead. The school counselor had mentioned one more thing as Harper was leaving her office. She had said it quietly, almost as an afterthought, the way people mention the most important things tucked at the end, as though they're still deciding whether to say it at all. "Ava wrote something last month," Ms. Tran had said, "for a class assignment, about courage." She had opened her desk drawer and taken out a single folded page. "I kept a copy. I don't know why exactly. It just seemed like something that should be kept." She had handed it to Harper. He had put it in his jacket pocket without reading it. Now he sat in his car in the station parking lot and took it out. The paper was standard lined school paper, the kind with the wide margins and the faded blue lines. Ava's handwriting was even and careful, the handwriting of someone who had learned that neatness was a form of being taken seriously. The assignment title at the top, written in red pen by the teacher, said, "What does courage mean to you?" And below it, in pencil, "Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. Courage means you do the thing anyway, even when your hands are shaking. I think real courage is quiet. It doesn't make a lot of noise, it just keeps going. Brave is not the same as strong. You can be brave and still cry. You can be brave in the bathroom so nobody sees. You can be brave by making lunch for someone smaller than you and pretending it's fine even when it isn't. I think the bravest people are the ones nobody notices. They just keep showing up, every day, without anyone saying thank you." Harper read it twice. Then he folded it the way it had been folded before and put it back in his pocket. He drove to the address that afternoon, not to speak with Melissa. She needed rest, not more visits. He went because he wanted to see the girls, to check, to make sure that the in-between hours, the ones between school and evening, were all right. He turned onto the street and slowed the car. Lily was in the front yard. She was standing in the middle of the small patch of grass, blowing bubbles from a plastic wand, watching each one float and catch the late afternoon light before disappearing. She was completely absorbed in this, her whole face turned upward, tracking each bubble with a seriousness that only very young children bring to things that are actually just beautiful. Ava was on the porch steps. Her backpack was beside her, open, a textbook across her knees, but she wasn't reading. She was watching Lily the way she always seemed to be watching her, that steady, patient attention that had nothing to do with homework and everything to do with something much older than 11 years should require. She saw Harper's car slow and recognized him before he had fully stopped. She didn't stand up. She just watched him walk across the yard the way she watched most things, carefully, giving nothing away until she had decided what something meant. "Hi," Harper said. "Hi," Ava said. He sat down on the porch steps a few feet from her, the way you sit when you're not trying to be official, not across from someone, not above them, just nearby. Lily noticed him from the yard, waved her bubble wand in his direction with great enthusiasm, and went back to her bubbles. "How was school?" Harper asked. "Fine," Ava said. Then, after a moment, "Ms. Tran talked to me today. She said you came by." "I did." Ava looked at the textbook on her knees. "Did she show you the lunch records?" Harper paused. "Yes." Ava nodded slowly, the way she nodded when information confirmed something she had already known. "I wasn't hungry those days," she said. Harper didn't challenge that. He let it sit. After a moment, Ava said, still looking at the textbook, "Did you file the report?" "Not yet," Harper said. She looked up at him. "Why not?" she asked. Not with relief, with genuine curiosity, the kind that wants to understand the reasoning, not just the outcome. Harper considered his answer carefully. "Because I don't think a form is going to tell me what I actually need to know about your family," he said. "And I don't think I should make a decision about your lives based on something I don't fully understand yet." Ava was quiet for a long moment. A bubble from Lily's wand drifted up between them and caught the light, rainbow-edged, perfect briefly, and then was gone. "She's better today," Ava said, meaning Melissa. "She got up and made toast. She sat with us at breakfast." There was something in the way she said it. Not relief exactly, but the particular brightness of someone reporting a small victory that most people would never understand was a victory at all. "That's good," Harper said. "It is," Ava agreed. And then quietly, "She tries. I just want people to understand that she really tries." Harper looked at this girl, 11 years old cold, textbook on her knees, watching her sister chase bubbles across the grass, carrying a weight that should never have been hers, and doing it without complaint, without self-pity, without anything except the steady, quiet determination he had just read about in her own handwriting. He thought about the last line of her essay. I think the bravest people are the ones nobody notices. They just keep showing up every day without anyone saying thank you. Ava, he said, I want you to know that I see it. She looked at him. I see how hard you're working, he said, and it matters. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at Lily and her bubbles. She didn't say anything, but something in her shoulders, just slightly, just a little, came down. Harper went home that evening and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. His wife, Carol, knew when not to ask questions. She had been married to him long enough to recognize the particular stillness that meant he was working something out. Not a case in the procedural sense, but something that had gotten under his skin in the way that a few cases did every so often in a career that was mostly routine. She made dinner. She sat with him. She didn't push. After a while, he took the folded page out of his jacket pocket and set it on the table between them. Carol read it without a word. When she finished, she set it down carefully and looked at him. How old? She said. 11. Carol looked at the page again. Then she got up quietly and took the dinner plates to the sink. Harper stared at the essay. The bravest people are the ones nobody notices. He had read those words 4 times now, and each time they landed slightly differently. First as observation, then as indictment, then as something more personal than he was comfortable with, because he had noticed Ava. He had been in the same room with her, had heard her speak, had seen the lunch records and the notepad on Melissa's kitchen table, and the drawing on the refrigerator. He had noticed, but noticing wasn't the same as acting, and he still hadn't decided what acting looked like. He went to bed and slept poorly and was at the school before 8 the next morning. Ms. Tran was already in her office when he arrived, a coffee cup in one hand and a folder in the other, in the manner of someone who had been there for some time. She looked at him over the rim of her glasses. You're back. I need to ask you something, Harper said, about the family, about what's actually available, not the standard referrals, not the default list, what's actually possible. Ms. Tran set down her coffee and her folder and gave him her full attention. They talked for 40 minutes. She knew the landscape better than he did, the specific programs, the ones that worked and the ones that existed mostly on paper, the community organizations that were quietly effective and the ones that were well-meaning but slow. She knew which church on Millbrook's east side had run a food assistance program for years before it went dormant. She knew the name of the county medical coordinator who handled expedited applications for residents with documented health conditions. She also knew, and said plainly, that none of it would move without someone pushing it from the inside. These things don't activate on their own, she said. Somebody has to make the calls. Somebody has to follow up. Somebody has to be the connective tissue between Melissa and the programs that could actually help her. Harper thought about that word. Connective tissue. He had spent 19 years as the person who responded after things had already gone wrong. He was trained to arrive at the scene, assess, report, contain. He was not trained to be connective tissue, but here he was. He visited the girls that afternoon again, this time briefly, just long enough to check in. Melissa was up, sitting in the rocking chair on the porch when he arrived, wrapped in the folded blanket, a mug held in both hands. She looked tired, but present. She nodded at him when he approached, not warmly, not coldly, just acknowledgement, a woman who had decided provisionally that he wasn't there to make things harder. Lily was in the yard again with the bubble wand. Harper was beginning to understand that this was how Lily processed the world, by making small, beautiful, temporary things and watching them go. Ava appeared at the screen door. She looked at Harper, then at her mother, then back at Harper. Can I talk to you? She said. He stepped onto the porch. Ava came out and pulled the screen door closed behind her. She stood with her back against the siding of the house, arms crossed, not defensively, just the posture of someone organizing their thoughts. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said yesterday, about not filing the report yet. All right, Harper said. I need to know something, Ava said. She looked at him directly, the way she always did. If you do file it, eventually what actually happens? Not the official version, what actually happens? Harper was quiet for a moment. He had 2 choices here. He could soften it, shape it into something less frightening, the way adults often did with children out of a misguided kindness, or he could treat her the way she clearly needed to be treated, as someone who had already been handling hard truths for a long time and deserved honesty over comfort. He chose honesty. He explained, carefully, in plain language, that a report opened a process, that the process involved multiple agencies, that those agencies were trying to help but were also managing enormous caseloads, and that in situations involving a single parent with limited resources, the outcome wasn't always predictable. Ava listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. A bubble from Lily's wand drifted up between them, the 3rd or 4th one Harper had watched disappear since he arrived, and this time, Ava watched it too. Then she said, if they take Lily away from me, Mom won't wake up at all. She said it quietly, not dramatically, just plain plainly the way she said everything, as a simple statement of what she understood to be true. Harper stood very still, because in 19 years of cases and files and standard procedures, no one had ever said anything to him that landed quite like that. He looked at this 11-year-old girl standing against the siding of her house, watching a bubble disappear into the afternoon sky, holding her whole family in the only way she knew how, and he understood, with a certainty that settled into him like something permanent, that the standard procedure was not going to be enough, not even close. Harper drove back to the station slowly. He sat at his desk for a long time without touching the folder. The office moved around him, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, Briggs talking too loudly about something on the other side of the room, the ordinary machinery of the department running the way it always ran, indifferent to the fact that Harper was sitting in the middle of it trying to make a decision that no procedure manual had ever quite covered. He thought about what Ava had said. If they take Lily away from me, Mom won't wake up at all. He thought about Melissa in the rocking chair, holding her mug with both hands, about the drawing on the refrigerator, about 11 lunches Ava hadn't eaten so that Lily could. He thought about his mother's kitchen. Then he picked up his phone. The first call was to the county medical assistance office. He had the number from a community resources list that had been pinned to the department bulletin board for so long it had faded at the edges. He asked to speak with the coordinator for expedited applications, the person Ms. Tran had mentioned, who handled cases with documented medical conditions. He was put on hold for 4 minutes. When the coordinator came on, a woman named Mrs. Ellison, brisk and efficient, Harper explained the situation plainly. Single parent, progressive arthritis, former healthcare worker, 2 children. He did not describe it as a police matter. He described it as a neighbor trying to understand what was available. Mrs. Ellison was quiet for a moment. Then she said that if there was documentation of the medical condition, which there was, Ms. Tran had confirmed the school had records of Melissa's disclosure, an expedited application could be submitted within 48 hours. Processing would still take time, but it was a door. Harper wrote down everything she told him. The second call was to the East Side church Ms. Tran had mentioned, the one with the dormant food assistance program. A man answered who introduced himself as Father DeLuca. He was warm and immediately sorry in the way of someone who had been meaning to do something for a while and hadn't quite gotten there. We paused the program 8 months ago, Father DeLuca said. We lost 2 of our main volunteers and things just stopped moving. But the infrastructure is still there. The relationships with the suppliers are still active. We just need someone to, he paused. We just need someone to restart it. What would that take? Harper asked. 3 committed volunteers in about 2 weeks. Harper wrote that down too. The third call was to the school's front office to ask a question about the weekend meal pack program, whether it was running, whether there was capacity, whether a referral from the counselor's office was sufficient to activate it without additional documentation. It was. It did. It could start by Friday. He hung up from the third call and looked at his notepad. 3 calls, 3 open doors, narrow ones, bureaucratic ones, not guaranteed, but open. He was reaching for the phone a 4th time when Okafor appeared at the edge of his desk. She looked at the notepad, at the phone, at Harper. Daniel, she said, in the tone she used when she was about to say something she had been considering carefully. The system logs internal calls by case reference. If you've been making contact with external agencies related to an open file without formal authorization, the file isn't formally open, Harper said. That's the problem, Okafor said. You're creating a paper trail whether you mean to or not. And if this comes up in review, she stopped. There was an audit flagged last quarter. Processes are being looked at. Harper looked at her. What are you telling me? He asked. Okafor was quiet for a moment. I'm telling you, she said carefully, that if you're going to do this, you need to do it the right way, not just for the family, for yourself. She glanced at the notepad. What have you got so far? He told her. She listened. Her expression didn't change much. It rarely did. But she picked up his notepad and read through his notes herself, which meant she was taking it seriously. She set it back down. The church program, she said. Father DeLuca, I know him. He's reliable. She paused. The medical application is the most important piece. Without that, everything else is temporary. I know, Harper said. Okafor looked at him for a long moment. This only works, she said, if the mother wants help. And I mean really wants it. Not just tolerates it because someone showed up at her door. If she's not ready, I know, Harper said again. Okafor nodded once. Then you'd better find out. She walked back to her office without another word. Harper sat with his notepad in front of him and thought about Melissa's hands wrapped around the mug, about the way she had said I was going to fix it, not as an excuse, but as a truth she still believed. He wasn't sure she was ready, but he also knew that waiting for perfect readiness was how months became years, and years became something harder to come back from. He was still sitting with that when his desk phone rang. He answered. It was the school's front office, a routine call about a permission form. He handled it, hung up, and looked at the notepad again. 3 open doors. One question he couldn't answer from a desk. He put on his jacket and went to find out. Harper didn't go straight to Melissa's house. He sat in the car outside the station for a few minutes, thinking about what Okafor had said. This only works if the mother wants help, really wants it. He knew she was right. He had seen enough situations in 19 years to understand that help offered to someone not yet ready to receive it could do more damage than no help at all. It could feel like intrusion, like judgment dressed up as assistance. It could push someone further into the silence they had been living in. Melissa wasn't there yet. He could feel it. She was closer than she had been. The fact that she had opened the door, that she had sat with him at the kitchen table and made tea and told him things she hadn't told anyone, that meant something. But there was a difference between someone willing to talk and someone ready to accept real, sustained, practical help. He needed to think about the approach. He started the car and drove, not to Melissa's street but along it slowly. The way you drive when you are looking at something you want to understand better. The houses, the lots, the rhythm of a neighborhood that had been here long enough to have its own particular texture. He was almost at the end of the block when he saw her. A woman in her 70s maybe, in a light green cardigan, standing at the edge of her front walk with a small rake in one hand and a look on her face that said she had come outside with the intention of doing something and had then gotten distracted by thinking she was looking at Melissa's house. Harper pulled over. He got out slowly, not wanting to startle her, and walked toward her with the unhurried manner he used when he wasn't in any official capacity. "Good afternoon," he said. She turned. She was sharp-eyed and white-haired, with the straight posture of someone who had always paid attention to such things. She looked at him, at his plain clothes, at his car, back at him, with the calm assessment of someone who had been reading people for 7 decades. "You were here yesterday," she said. "I saw you go in." Harper nodded. "My name is Daniel Harper. I'm an officer with the department, but I'm here informally." He paused. "Did you know the family?" She looked back at Melissa's house. "I've known Melissa since she moved in," she said. 7 years ago. She used to bring me things from her garden in the summer. Tomatoes, sometimes zucchini." The corner of her mouth moved. "More zucchini than anyone needs." "When did things change?" Harper asked. The woman was quiet for a moment. "Gradually," she said, "and then all at once, the way things do." She looked at the rake in her hand as if she had forgotten it was there. "After her husband passed, I watched the lights. I don't mean to sound strange. I just knew the patterns of that house. The morning light in the kitchen, the porch light on in the evenings. Little by little, the patterns changed." "Did you reach out to her?" The woman looked at him, and what he saw in her face was not indifference. It was something far more familiar and far more complicated than that. "I made a casserole," she said, 3 weeks ago. "Chicken and rice. It's what I make when I don't know what else to do." She paused. "I walked across the street. I stood at her door for 5 minutes." Harper waited. "And then I came back home," she said. "I put the casserole in my own refrigerator and I ate it over 4 days. And I told myself I would try again." She looked at him directly. "I didn't try again." "Why not?" Harper asked. She was quiet for a long moment. The rake hung in her hand. Down the street, a child on a bicycle rode past without looking at them. "I lost my son," she said finally, 12 years ago. "He was sick for a long time." She said it plainly, without drama, the way people speak about things that have been carried so long they no longer have sharp edges. "After that, I became very careful about stepping into other people's pain, because I knew how it felt to have people step into mine and not know what to do once they were there." She paused. "I was afraid I would do more harm than good." Harper stood with that for a moment, because it was the truest thing anyone had said to him all week. Truer, even, than Ava's words in the office, because it named the thing underneath the silence. Not cruelty, not laziness, not selfishness, fear. The fear of arriving and not knowing what to do, of making it worse, of standing in someone's doorway holding a casserole and having nothing adequate to say about any of it. The whole neighborhood had been standing at that door. Nobody had knocked. "What's your name?" Harper asked. "Ruth," she said. "Ruth Caldwell." Harper nodded. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said. "I think you knowing what it feels like, the hard parts, the not knowing, might actually be exactly what Melissa needs right now. Not someone with all the answers, just someone who's been through something and came out the other side." Ruth looked at him for a long time. Then she looked at the casserole dish through her own front window, or where it would be if she could see through walls, which Harper suspected she sometimes felt she could. "I still have the recipe memorized," she said quietly. "I know," Harper said. And for the first time since this whole thing began, something that felt like a real possibility, not a procedure, not a referral, not a form in triplicate, but an actual human possibility, opened up in front of him. He was not the connective tissue. Ruth Caldwell was. He just had to help her find the door. Harper knocked on Melissa's door with Ruth Caldwell standing beside him. Ruth had changed into a different cardigan, blue with small buttons, and was carrying the casserole dish covered in foil. Reheated, the smell of chicken and rice coming through the wrapping in a way that was immediately and unmistakably domestic. The smell of someone having taken time. The smell of someone having thought about you. Harper had said very little on the walk across the street. Ruth hadn't needed instruction. Once she decided to do something, he understood. She moved with the quiet determination of someone who had simply been waiting for permission that was actually just courage. Melissa opened the door. She looked at Harper first, the expected presence, and then at Ruth. Something shifted in her face. Not quite recognition, not quite surprise. Something more layered than either. "Ruth," she said softly. "Hello, Melissa," Ruth said. "I made you chicken and rice. I should have brought it weeks ago." She paused. "I'm sorry it took me this long." Melissa looked at the casserole dish. It was such a simple object. Foil covered, slightly dented at one corner. The kind of dish that had been to 100 kitchens and come back again. And yet something about it, the weight of it, or the smell, or simply the fact of it being held out by a neighbor who had walked across the street, seemed to reach something in Melissa that words and procedures had not quite touched. She stepped back from the door. "Come in," she said. They sat at the kitchen table, the three of them. Melissa put the casserole in the oven to stay warm. Ruth talked, not about the situation, not about what Harper had told her, but about ordinary things. The garden on the corner that always bloomed early. The new family 2 blocks over with the very loud but apparently friendly dog. Small things, neighborhood things, the kind of talk that says, "You are still part of this place. You have not been forgotten." Melissa listened, and slowly, by degrees so small they were almost invisible, she began to talk back. Harper said very little. He was not there to direct the conversation. He was there because Ruth had asked him to stay, and because his presence meant that what was happening had some official witness, not formal, not documented, just witnessed. Before Ruth left, she took out her phone, a slightly older model that she operated with the careful deliberateness of someone who had learned it later in life, and exchanged numbers with Melissa, not with fanfare, just practically, the way you exchange numbers with someone you expect to talk to again. On the way out, Ruth paused on the porch. "I'm going to call Francis," she said to Harper. "And Margaret, they're on the street too. They've been asking about Melissa for months and not knowing what to do either." She looked at him. "I think we just needed someone to go first." Harper nodded. He waited until Ruth had crossed back to her house before he went back inside. Melissa was standing at the counter. She looked at him, and her expression had something in it that hadn't been there before. Not resolution, not certainty. Something earlier than those things. The beginning of believing that something might be possible. "She came," Melissa said. "She wanted to," Harper said. "She just needed a push." Melissa looked at the oven where the casserole was warming. "I didn't know people were still." She stopped, started again. "I thought maybe everyone had just moved on." "They hadn't," Harper said. "They were just afraid of doing the wrong thing." Melissa was quiet. Then Harper said carefully, "I want to talk to you about some things that are available. Programs, medical assistance. I've been making some calls. Nothing is decided. Nothing happens without you. But I want you to know what exists." Melissa looked at him. Here it was. The moment Okafor had named. The real one. Not the opening of the door. Not the casserole. Not the kitchen table conversation. This moment. Whether Melissa was ready to hear it and say yes. She pulled out a chair and sat down. "Okay," she said. "Tell me." Harper sat across from her and did. He was back at the station by 4 o'clock. Okafor was waiting at the edge of his desk. She looked at him with the expression she used when she was assessing something she had not yet fully decided about. "How did it go?" she said. "She listened," Harper said. "She didn't say yes yet, but she listened." Okafor nodded slowly. Then she said, "There's something else. HR flagged the call logs from Tuesday. The external agency contacts without formal case authorization." She held his gaze. "There's going to be a formal note in your file, Daniel. A conduct notation. Nothing that ends anything, but it's real." Harper was quiet for a moment. "I understand," he said. "I want to make sure you do," Okafor said, "because it can't happen again without documentation. If you're going to keep doing what you're doing, and I'm not telling you to stop, it needs to be done properly from here forward." Harper looked at his desk, at the folder that was still open, at the pen that had been hovering over the form for days now. "I'll do it properly," he said. Okafor held his gaze for one more moment. Then she picked up her coffee and walked back toward her office. At the door, she stopped without turning around. "The church program," she said. "Father DeLuca called me this afternoon. He has 2 volunteers already." She went into her office and closed the door. Harper sat at his desk. Outside the station windows, the afternoon was going gray, and the streetlights were beginning to come on one by one down the block. He thought about Ruth Caldwell walking across the street with a casserole dish and 5 minutes of courage. He thought about Melissa saying, "Okay, tell me." He thought about the conduct notation going into his file and how, sitting here now, he found that he did not regret a single call. He picked up the folder. For the first time since Ava and Lily had walked through his office door, he began to write. Not the standard form, but a different kind of documentation. One that told the real story. One that Ms. Tran had helped him understand. That Ruth Caldwell had helped him see. That Ava had handed him in a folded essay on lined school paper. One that might, if handled carefully, open the right doors without closing the wrong ones. He wrote until the office emptied around him. Then he went home, sat at the kitchen table, and told Carol everything. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What happens next?" Harper looked at his hands. "She has to say yes," he said. "Really say it." Carol nodded. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, and somewhere across town, a woman was sitting at a kitchen kitchen table with a neighbor's casserole going warm in the oven, thinking about what it might mean to let someone help. The formal notation arrived in Harper's file on a Thursday morning. He found out the way these things happened in the department, quietly, through a message from the HR coordinator that appeared in his inbox between a shift schedule update and a reminder about the annual equipment review. 2 sentences: professional, impersonal. A conduct notation for deviation from standard case documentation protocol. He read it twice, closed the message, and went to get coffee. Briggs was at the machine when he got there. "Heard you got a notation," Briggs said, not unkindly. Briggs wasn't unkind, just direct in the way that left no space for anything to land softly. "I did," Harper said. "Worth it?" Harper poured his coffee. Thought about Ruth Caldwell walking across the street in her blue cardigan. Thought about Melissa saying, "Okay, tell me." Thought about Lily blowing bubbles in the front yard while Ava watched from the steps. "Ask me again in a few weeks," he said. Briggs shrugged and took his coffee and left. Harper stood at the machine alone for a moment. He had known the notation was coming. Okafor had told him it would. It was not a surprise, and it was not the end of anything. It was a small, real consequence of a choice he had made with his eyes open. He could live with that. What he was less sure he could live with was the alternative, the standard form, the standard process, the doors it might open that couldn't be closed again. He went to Okafor's office. She was at her desk with 3 folders open in front of her, reading glasses on, the particular expression of someone managing more than one complicated thing at once. She looked up when he knocked on the open door. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She took her glasses off and set them on the desk. "I assume you got the message," she said. "I did. And I understand it," Harper said. "And I'm not going to pretend I'd do it differently." Okafor looked at him for a moment. Then she almost smiled. Not quite, but close. The kind of almost smile that meant she respected something even if she wasn't going to say so directly. "No," she said. "I don't suppose you would." She picked up one of the folders on her desk and turned it so he could see it. Inside was a printed copy of the document Harper had written the previous evening, the real account of the case, the one that told the actual story of the family rather than fitting it into standard categories. "I read it this morning," she said. "All of it." Harper waited. "It's good," she said. "It's careful. It's honest without being sentimental." She paused. "It's also the kind of document that, handled correctly, can justify a non-standard intervention pathway, which means we can proceed without triggering the default process." Harper straightened slightly. "You can do that?" "I can authorize a community welfare coordination approach," Okafor said. "It exists. It's used rarely because it requires more work and more documentation than the standard route, but it exists." She looked at him. "It means you stay involved. Ms. Tran stays involved. The church program, the medical application, Mrs. Caldwell and her neighbors." She paused. "It means Melissa has a support structure built around her instead of a process imposed on her." Harper was quiet for a moment. "What does she need to do?" he asked. "She needs to formally agree to the coordination plan," Okafor said, "in writing, which means she needs to understand it clearly and say yes to it voluntarily." A pause. "Which brings us back to the question I asked you before, whether she's ready," Harper said. "Whether she's ready," Okafor confirmed. Harper thought about the previous evening, about Melissa sitting across from him at the kitchen table, hands around her mug, listening while he walked her through what was available. She had asked questions, careful, specific ones, the kind of questions that come from someone genuinely trying to understand, rather than looking for a reason to refuse. She had not said yes, but she had not said no. She had said, "I need to think about it." He had respected that. He still did. "I'm going to go see her this afternoon," Harper said. Okafor nodded. Then she picked up her glasses and put them back on, which meant the conversation was approaching its end. "Daniel," she said, not looking up from the folder. "Yes, the notation stays in the file. That's not changing." She turned a page. "But the work you did, the calls, the documentation, the approach, that was right, even if the timing was imperfect." She paused. "Sometimes the process needs to catch up with the situation. That's what we're doing here." Harper stood. "One more thing," Okafor said. He stopped at the door. "Father DeLuca confirmed 3 volunteers for the church program this morning," she said. "It restarts Saturday." She looked at him over her glasses. "Mrs. Caldwell is one of them." Harper stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went to get his jacket and drove across town. The pale yellow house was quiet when he pulled up. The rocking chair on the porch was empty today, the blanket folded over the arm the way it always was. The garden along the front walk looked slightly different than it had earlier in the week. Someone had cleared the dead growth along the left edge, leaving the stubborn survivors more room. He wasn't sure who had done that, but he had a feeling it hadn't been Melissa. He knocked. Melissa answered more quickly than she had before. She was dressed, actually dressed, not the cardigan over pajamas of the first visit. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She looked tired, but the particular kind of tired that comes after doing something rather than the kind that comes from being unable to do anything at all. She had been moving. "I've been thinking," she said before he could speak. "So have I," Harper said. She stepped back from the door. "Come in," she said. "I made tea." The tea was already poured when Harper sat sat down. That was different. Every other time he had been in this kitchen, the kettle had gone on after he arrived. Something to do with the hands, something to manage while deciding how much to say. This time the mugs were already on the table, steam rising, as if she had been expecting him at a specific time and had prepared accordingly. Harper wrapped both hands around the mug and waited. Melissa sat across from him. She looked at her tea, then at the table, then at him. "I almost called you last night to say no," she said. Harper nodded. "What stopped you?" Melissa was quiet for a moment. "Ava," she said. She told him what had happened. Late evening, after Harper had gone, she had sat at the kitchen table for a long time with the papers he had left. The program information, the medical application outline, the simple list of what saying yes would mean practically. She had read them several times. And the more she read them, the more something in her had started pulling toward the version of this that felt like surrender, like proof of what she feared most, that she had failed at the one thing she was supposed to do. She had been very close to deciding. Then Ava had come downstairs. She hadn't known her mother was still awake. She had come for a glass of water and found Melissa at the table with the papers spread in front of her and an expression that Ava, apparently, could read as clearly as a weather forecast. She had sat down without saying anything. She had not asked what was wrong. She had not offered advice. She was 11 years old. She had simply sat down beside her mother and placed her hand over her mother's hand and stayed there. Melissa looked at the table. She didn't say a word, she said. She just stayed. A pause. And I thought, what am I protecting exactly? My pride. While she's been the one getting up every morning and making sure everything keeps going. Her voice stayed steady, but just barely. She's 11, and she sat there at midnight holding my hand because she didn't want me to be alone with whatever I was deciding. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, somewhere down the street, a car passed slowly. "I'm not good at asking for help," Melissa said. "I never have been. In my family, you figured things out yourself. Asking meant weakness. Weakness meant..." She stopped. It just wasn't done. Harper thought about his mother, about pride that holds a family together and costs something at the same time. "Accepting help isn't the same as giving up," he said. "It means you're still fighting, just not alone." Melissa looked at her hands, the stiffened joints, the capable hands that had cared for so many people in so many hard moments. "I know that," she said quietly. "Logically, I know that. It's just..." She paused. "It's different when it's yours." "I know," Harper said. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table to the small stack of papers Harper had left and aligned them neatly, the way you organize something you have decided to deal with. "What do I need to sign first?" she said. Harper reached into his jacket pocket for the coordination agreement Okafor had prepared. He set it on the table between them. Melissa looked at it. Then she picked up the pen that was sitting beside the sugar bowl, her own pen, already there, already waiting, and signed her name at the bottom in the clear, unhurried handwriting of someone who had made up their mind. She put the pen down. "Okay," she said, not dramatically, not with relief that spilled over, just okay. A door opening, a weight shifting, the beginning of a different kind of morning. Harper picked up the signed page carefully. He thought about Okafor's voice saying this only works if she wants help, really wants it. She wanted it. He drove back to the station with the windows down despite the cold. The coordination plan moved the way careful things move, not quickly, but steadily. The medical assistance application went in within 48 hours of Melissa's signature. Mrs. Ellison at the county office had been as good as her word. The expedited pathway existed, the documentation was sufficient, and while approval would still take time, the application was in and moving rather than sitting on a list somewhere waiting to begin. The church food program restarted on Saturday. Harper drove past the East Side Church that morning without stopping, just slowing enough to see the door propped open, a folding table set up just inside, boxes being carried in from a van parked at the curb. Father DeLuca was there in a dark jacket, directing things with the quiet efficiency of someone glad to be doing something he had been meaning to do for a long time. Ruth Caldwell was there too, in her blue cardigan carrying a box that looked slightly too heavy for her, refusing any help with it. Harper kept driving. The school's weekend meal program activated by Friday, as Ms. Tran had promised. The first kit came home with Lily in her backpack, discreet, unannounced, tucked in alongside her library book and her folder of drawings. Lily characteristically accepted it without comment and immediately asked if the crackers inside were the good kind. They were. Life in the pale yellow house began, slowly, to change its rhythm. Melissa got up each morning, not always easily, not always early, but consistently. There were days when the arthritis was worse, and the movement through the kitchen was slower, and the morning took longer to get started. Those days still happened. Harper had not promised they wouldn't. What changed was that on those days, there was now a structure around her, a program, a neighbor, a signed piece of paper that meant she was not navigating it alone. Ruth came by on Tuesdays to drive Melissa to the physical therapy clinic. She brought Francis on Wednesdays, another neighbor, 70-ish, with a directness that Melissa seemed to find oddly comforting. Margaret, the third neighbor Ruth had called, started leaving things on the porch. message. Not grand gestures, just small ones. A container of soup, a paperback she thought Melissa might like. Things that said, "I thought of you today." Ava still woke up early, still packed Lily's bag, still moved through the mornings with that quiet competence that had become her default mode over the past year and a half. But there were differences now, small ones. She sometimes came downstairs to find the coffee already made. She sometimes found Melissa at the table, awake, reading something, not staring at the wall, not barely present, but there, actually there. One morning Melissa made pancakes. She didn't announce it. She just made them and put them on the table, and Lily climbed into her chair and said, "Are there blueberries?" in the tone of someone who expected the answer to be yes. There were. Lily ate everyone without picking them out. Ava stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the scene. Her mother at the stove, her sister at the table, the ordinary domestic morning that had been missing for so long. And then she sat down and ate her pancakes without saying anything at all. Some things are too important for words. Harper heard about the pancakes from Ms. Tran, who heard it from Lily, who had told her entire class. He was sitting at his desk when Ms. Tran texted him. Just 4 words. "She made pancakes today." He read it, set his phone down, looked at the ceiling for a moment, then picked the phone back up because he had 4 messages to return and a case review at 2 o'clock, and the day was not going to stop moving just because something small and important had happened in a pale yellow house across town. But he smiled, quietly, to himself, and that was enough. Then his phone rang again. It was Ms. Rivera from the County Social Services office. The tone of her voice when she said his name told him, before she said another word, that something had just gotten complicated. Ms. Rivera was thorough, and she was sorry. She said both of those things in the first 30 seconds of the call, which told Harper that what was coming was real, and that she had been sitting with it before dialing. She had been processing Melissa's coordination file, cross-referencing it with the county's assistance database, the way procedure required, when she found it. Months ago, during a period when Melissa had been managing everything alone and was not doing well, she had received a formal notice about a county assistance benefit, housing support, a modest program, not widely publicized. Melissa had returned the form, incomplete, unsigned in the required field. In the database, that registered as a formal refusal, and a formal refusal, under the program's eligibility rules, created a waiting period before reapplication. The waiting period was not over. Harper sat very still. "How long?" he asked. Ms. Rivera told him. It wasn't years. It wasn't permanent. But it was long enough to create a gap, a window where the medical application could proceed, but the housing support component, the piece that stabilized Melissa's financial situation enough to make everything else sustainable, could not. Without that piece, the rest of the structure was fragile. "She didn't refuse it intentionally," Harper said. "I understand that," Ms. Rivera said, "but the system doesn't have a category for unintentional refusal. It has refused and not refused." A pause. "I'm sorry, Officer Harper. I'm telling you because I want to find a way through this, not because I want to close the door." Harper appreciated that. He said so. He hung up and sat without moving for a long moment. Then he went to Okafor. She listened to all of it. When he finished, she was quiet in the way she was quiet when she was thinking rather than reacting. "There's an appeals process," she said finally. Ms. Rivera mentioned it. "It requires documentation of circumstance," Okafor said. "Medical records, a written account of the situation at the time of the non-response, a supporting statement from a credentialed professional." She looked at him. "Ms. Tran qualifies. A physician would be better." Harper thought of the clinic Melissa had started attending for her arthritis. The doctor there had already been briefed through the coordination plan. She had met Melissa twice. He picked up his phone. The next 2 days were the most tedious of the entire process. Phone calls returned after long holds, forms sent and resent, a supporting letter drafted by Ms. Tran, reviewed by Okafor, submitted and then flagged for a missing field and resubmitted, a medical summary from the clinic that arrived in the wrong format and had to be converted and reattached. Harper did not lose his patience. He came close, twice, but did not. On the afternoon of the second day, Ms. Rivera called back. Her voice was different this time. "The appeals coordinator reviewed the submission," she said. "Given the documented medical circumstances and the professional supporting statements, they've approved a compassionate exception." A pause. "The waiting period is waived, Officer Harper. The application can proceed in full." Harper put the phone down on his desk carefully, the way you set something down when you are aware of your own hands. He sat for a moment. Then he went to his jacket, got his keys, and drove to the school. He arrived just as the afternoon bell rang. Students came out in the usual wave, noise and backpacks, and the particular energy of children released from a contained space. He found Ava and Lily on the front steps. Lily saw him first and waved with her entire arm. Ava saw him a second later and did what she always did, read his face before he said anything. She read it correctly this time. Her shoulders came down slightly. "Is it okay?" she asked. Harper looked at this 11-year-old girl who had been holding everything together for longer than anyone her age should have to, and thought about all the forms and the phone calls and the 2 days of tedium that had led to this moment on a school sidewalk. "It's going to be okay," he said, and he meant it in the way that mattered, not as reassurance, not as a promise that nothing would ever be hard again, but as a true statement about direction. Lily considered this for exactly 1 second, and then held her arms out to Harper in the uncomplicated way of a 7-year-old who had decided something was good news, and that the appropriate response was a hug. He bent down. She wrapped both arms around his neck and held on with the full conviction of someone who did not yet know how to be careful about such things. Harper held on too. The food pantry smelled like cardboard and coffee and something baked that someone had brought from home. Harper had been coming on the first Saturday of the month for 6 weeks now. He didn't announce it to anyone at the department. He didn't put it in a report. He just showed up at 8 in the morning in plain clothes and did whatever needed doing, carrying boxes, stacking shelves, holding the door open for people coming in. Mostly, he held the door. It was a small thing, but he had come to understand that small things were frequently the hinge on which larger things turned. Ruth Caldwell was there every week without exception. She had taken on the role of coordinator with the quiet authority of someone who had found, late in life, a place where her particular combination of stubbornness and warmth was exactly what was needed. She organized the volunteers, remembered everyone's names, and brought homemade cookies on the third Saturday without explanation, which everyone accepted as simply the way things were now. The program had grown. 12 families in the first month, 19 by the second. Word moved through a neighborhood the way it always did, slowly and then all at once someone went first. Melissa had been in twice, not as a recipient, though she had been one quietly in the early weeks. She had come in as a volunteer, helping sort donations, talking with families who came through the door with the careful expressions of people not yet sure how to be there. She knew that expression. She had worn it herself. She was still in treatment for the arthritis. There were better weeks and harder weeks. The medication needed adjusting twice. Physical therapy was slow work, the kind that required patience she was still learning to have with herself. She went to both appointments every week without missing one. Ava still woke up early most mornings, but now, more often than not, she came downstairs to find Melissa already there. Coffee made, the news on low, a kind of quiet readiness to the morning that had been missing for a long time. Ava still kept a small container of crackers in her bedside drawer. Old habit, the kind that doesn't disappear overnight, that fades slowly as the mornings prove themselves trustworthy, one after another. Lily had stopped asking if they were going to move. She had started a new project involving the collection of interesting rocks from the schoolyard, which she kept in a shoebox under her bed and catalogued with a seriousness that suggested a future career in something methodical and exact. Life was not fixed. It was not wrapped up or resolved or made simple, but it was moving in a direction, and the direction was forward, and there were people on the path now who had not been there before. Harper was carrying an empty box to the back of the pantry when he heard the door open. He heard Lily first. Her voice carried the way 7-year-olds' voices do, with the natural volume of someone who has not yet learned to modulate for indoor spaces. He came around the corner. Ava and Lily were standing just inside the door. They had been passing, Ava said later. They were walking back from the park and had seen the door propped open and recognized it. Lily immediately spotted Ruth and went to show her a rock she had in her coat pocket. Ava saw Harper. She stood for a moment in the way she stood when she was organizing what she wanted to say. Then she crossed the room and stopped a few feet from him. "Thank you," she said, "for not looking away." Harper looked at this girl, 12 now, a few weeks past her birthday, the dark circles gone, the coat that had been too small replaced by one that fit, and thought about the afternoon she had walked into his office with her chin up and her hands flat on her knees and said the truest thing he had heard in 19 years of work. He did not tell her she was welcome in the easy way. He said, "I almost did." Ava looked at him. "But you didn't," she said. He nodded. She nodded back, that same small, certain nod he had seen the first day, and then turned to collect Lily, who was showing Ruth 3 rocks simultaneously and explaining the geological significance of each. Harper stood in the middle of the food pantry and watched them go. He thought about the office, the closed door, the folder, the pen suspended over the form. He thought about his mother's kitchen and the nights she didn't eat, and the question he never thought to ask. He thought about what it meant to notice something, and then decide what to do with the noticing. He went back to work. The door stayed open behind him. Outside, the neighborhood moved through its Saturday morning, unhurried, ordinary, alive with the small sounds of people going about their lives in proximity to one another. Someone had to hold the door. He was glad it had been him. Fade out. The end. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And before you go, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from.